Hi, thank you for joining me for this video on how to build and assemble a freestyle or racing quadcopter FPV drone. And for this I'm going to be using this Eachine Tyro109 build. If you want to put one of these together yourself. So this is going to be a long video, a step-by-step detail guide, and this is really to take you through every step so that you can see what process you'll need to follow if you're interested in doing one yourself. And I'll also share tips as we go through the process too. So these are all the components I have to assemble this Eachine Tyro109, and I will take you through this process now step by step. So to assemble this, we're going to need some tools and equipment. There's some soldering or soldering to be done, so you'll need a soldering iron, something to clean the soldering or soldering iron with. You'll need a hex key or hex screwdriver like this. Sorry, I'm not sure which size it is, but it's to fasten all the screws, and they all have the same size. Need some solder, and it's good if you've got solder that has flux. So this has 2% flux, but I also like using flux paste. I find it easier, so if you've got flux paste, that's also good. Need a small pair of pliers. Need side cutters. Need a wire stripper or hobby knife if we need to shorten wires. A lighter, or if you can even also use the soldering iron to shrink the heat shrink. And we also need a spanner to fasten the nuts for the motors, and also a smaller size spanner for these little nuts over here, and some patience. So what I find the best thing to do is to sort out all the screws into their various sizes. Now there is a manual that you can download. It's not that comprehensive, but it gives you some information. And here's a picture of the screws and where they go that is included in this manual. And I'll also put a link in the description where you can download this too. I've got all the screws assorted here in their various lengths and sizes with the standoffs, with the nuts. This is a unique little component on its own. I have some more nylon nuts here, nylon screws here. These are soft mounts, so this is a soft rubber. And then there's also 4 of these hard spaces. Let me clear the tools out of the way and we can proceed. So on the bottom we've got this X piece. It doesn't matter which way round. Then our arms are going to fit on here. And then this plate is going to fit on the top here with these protruding lugs facing upwards. Now the first thing to do is just get the arms all correct and symmetrical. So you'll notice here there's a rounded curve on one side, and on the other side we've got more of a jagged curve. It doesn't really make any difference as long as you've got them all the same. So if you've got the slight incline curve on the inside here, you must have the same there, the same here on the inside, and the same here on the inside. But the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to mount the motors. And if we look at the X shape here, the front left motor should be a clockwise motor, and the clockwise motors have the black nut on the top, and the counterclockwise motors have the silver nut on the top. That basically means if the motor starts turning clockwise, it actually fastens the nut on top, and if it turns anti-clockwise, the nut actually loosens. So basically it's going to be like this. And this is optional, but I'm going to soft mount the motors. This, I believe, does help reduce vibration, and especially if you've got a slightly imbalanced propeller, can also assist a bit. So there's 3 holes that this gets mounted, or the motor gets mounted onto, and this gets positioned like this. Then we need to take the M3 8mm screws, which you should have 16 of, and then this will just go in over here. Then take the motor. Although there's 4 places for the motor to secure, we're only going to secure it with 3. Get the wires down on the shaft side here, and then I can just screw this in by hand, finger tight, and there we've got the motor here. Take another one of the 8mm M3 screws, do it for the other hole that's available here, and another one for the remaining hole here. Okay, then all I need to do is tighten this up. And make sure these are tight, because these motor screws do tend to loosen up. I'm going to go ahead and do the other arms. I find it less clumsy to do this first rather than put the frame together and then secure the motors. And there's another reason why, and I'll show you shortly. These are all 4 motors mounted and secured now. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just take some sellotape. Now, because these wires aren't color coded, it's always better if you can get a motor where you have 3 different color wires. There is a possibility that this can overlap, and I don't want that confusion when I solder these wires onto the ESC. I'm just going to take some sellotape, and then just making sure these are all flat. Just put some sellotape over here just before the first hole on the arm. And the reason I'm doing this too is that we must put the heat shrink on the arms before we fasten the arms. Have a look here. There. Now we've got the heat shrink on the arm. These wires will stay flat, and I will know which sequence these wires are in. I'm going to do the same on the other 3 arms now. That's all 4 arms done and prepared now. So now I'll get these 16mm screws. I need 4 of them. And I'm going to put one under and feed it from the bottom on the holes on the end of this X plate here. like this. Now take this one here and the hole closest to the head shrink, or the third hole from here. I need to get that in there. Keep this in here. Position that one there. This one over here. On there, and then this one here too. Just get it all lined up and symmetrical here. Okay, this one's not going to happen. Let me just lift it up again. Get this one underneath it there. Try not to disturb all the screws. But like a jigsaw puzzle. So when you've done this, you can see that it all fits together nice and flush there. Now we need to get this plate back on, and as I mentioned earlier, we want these protruding lugs facing upwards. If I get the wires out of the way like this, put this one on here. Two on the back here, and now just get the wires out of the way and over here. And yeah, if it does get caught underneath, rather get the wires out over the top. Don't let it get jammed in underneath. So now we've got this on here. Then we've only got 4 of the silver nuts that we just need to put on to here now. Oh, sorry, we've got an extra one. We've got 5. Okay, this is it on here. I haven't fastened it too tightly yet, just finger tight on all 4. And now we can take 4 more of these 16mm screws and put them in at the bottom here. And now you'll see why I haven't fastened this too tightly, because we need a little bit of wiggle room to get it into position. There. Put another one here. Another one in there. Another one in here. And now tighten these up. And then when these are tightened, you can see it sits flush here. The screws don't protrude out of the top of these lugs here. And let me go ahead and tighten these 4 up now too. Okay, so these are fastened too. I just did it off screen because it's easier to fasten and hold the nuts out of the way of the camera. So always just double check. Make sure you've got your 2 clockwise motors, front left and bottom right, and your 2 counterclockwise, top right and bottom left. So this is the bottom of the frame assembled, and now ready to start building the stack or tower, whichever you like to call it. Now here we have 2 options. You can use standoffs. So we just take one of these 16mm screws You can start by putting it in the remaining hole that's on the arm here, and then start building it up with standoffs. But I prefer, and I'm pleased to see, that we have 5 of these long nylon screws here. So I'm going to be using this, and we'll just put one in each of the holes here. Now the first thing we need to do is put a spacer in between this plate before we put on the ESC, because the battery strap is going to feed through here. So we've got 4 of these hard spacers that I'm going to put onto 3 of these screws. Now on the front right screw here, we need to put this ABS round isolation column on too. So just going to use one of these soft mounts, put that on here, there, and then screw this down. Now the tricky thing is we've got to try and get this now at the same height as this stack here. This is looking as though it's a bit too high. So it looks as though I'm going to have to put quite a bit of pressure on it to get it down. And this actually requires a star Phillips screwdriver to fasten. Okay, have we got it flush here? So now it is more or less the same height. We'll see when we put the ESC on whether it's flat and level. And now this is where the orientation of the craft is important. So again, make sure you've got your front with a clockwise motor on the left arm here, and we put the 4-in-1 ESC on here with this capacitor facing towards the rear. So now if we have a look here, it does seem flat. Probably better to look at it from the front here. Yes. And now we need to prepare these motor wires for soldering. And now this is why it was quite important for me to keep these things in sequence. Now here you have a couple of options. Some people might prefer to take it around and underneath, but just remember the battery strap has to come in here, so that's not a good idea. Some people might prefer to take it around this way and solder it on the top with the wires inside, but I don't recommend this for 2 reasons. Firstly, the flight controller is going to come on top here, and it has a gyro, and anything that might touch or vibrate could interfere with the performance. So it's better to keep this area clear. And also if you start soldering like this, solder beads can start disappearing beneath the wire here where you can't see it. So I'm going to be soldering it on the outside here. So now you can see these wires are too long, so we don't want any unnecessary long wires that can snag on things. And I also like to see the solder joint, so if anything goes wrong it's easier to see rather than it being underneath. Now here you have to be careful, you don't want to cut these wires too short. So as you can see now, I'm taking the one on the furthest away that I'm going to put on the nearest here. I'm take the one that's middle on to the next one, and the one on the outside onto the next one here, and repeat the same process all the way around. Now when it comes to cutting the wire, you really need to be very careful, because if you cut it too short, you're going to create a problem and it's going to start getting messy. So, you know, you could give it a bit of extra, make sure, because then you could tuck the wire further back and under the heat shrink afterwards, and this will tension it up when we heat up the heat shrink. So have a look here. I'm going to snip this wire off here. Now unfortunately, although this was pre-tinned, it is too long, and this has got a fairly hard plastic sheath. If it was silicone, it'd be much easier, much better to work with. So now I'll just demonstrate to you quickly here. You need to be careful when you remove some of the sheath here, not to cut the wire, because then you're going to end up having the wire too short. So I'll just show you an example here using a wire stripper, or else you can take a hobby knife and just gently incise here until you can remove a small piece of the sheath at the end. But you want to be careful that you don't cut the wire, because it's going to end up too short. So let me just put this in here. And using a wire stripper is much easier and safer, and we still got the wire intact. So now do the next wire. So I'm going to take the middle wire here, get it into the position that I'm going to need. And snip off there. Take the wire now that's closest, position it here and on the next one. And snip. And now I'm going to follow the same process for the others all the way around. Here all the wires cut now, and now I'm just going to go and strip off not more than 3 millimeters, probably only about 2 millimeters off of the end of each one of these. So here the ends of the wires all prepared and ready to be tinned. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to take the ESC off, and I'm going to prepare the pads with solder away from it being mounted on the craft so that I don't burn any plastic or any of the nylon with the soldering iron in the process. Okay, got this 4-in-1 ESC electronic speed controller that I want to prepare to connect motor wires to on all these pads here. So I'll just hold this down. I'm heated up to 300 degrees. Hold it down on here and introduce some solder. Okay, got some on here. I want to just get a bit more on. Okay, got some there. Hold it down, heat it up here again. Introduce some more solder. Got solder on there. Get this solder on right here. A bit more on here. Do the same over here. Okay, that's this side done. Going to go and do the other side. Okay, so this is it prepared. And while I'm here, I'm also going to solder on the battery connector. So over here we can see ground will be the black wire, and the red wire will go on the right hand side here. I'm going to heat up the right pad here and get quite a generous bit of solder onto here. Okay, now I don't want it touching the capacitor here. Okay, so these are the battery connection wires now soldered onto the ESC. And now I also need to prepare the flight controller, this FC board. Because I'm using FrSky, I'm going to be using S-Bus. And if we look a bit closer over here, I need to bridge the left and the middle pin here with a bit of solder for S-Bus. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so if you can see this okay, just over here I've bridged it for S-Bus. So if you are going to be connecting an FrSky receiver, make sure that you bridge the connection over here too. And now I'm also just going to prepare the XM Plus receiver by putting wires onto these three pads here. And for the receiver, we get this cable with this, and it's got the 3-pin that plugs into the flight controller, and then this can plug into pins if you want to solder these pins onto the receiver, but I prefer to solder the wires on direct. So I'm just going to snip this part off and use this part to solder onto the receiver. So on the flight controller here, we've got this 3-pin socket for a receiver to connect to. I've just tinned these wires by taking some flux and putting it on the ends of the wires, and then just getting a bit of solder on the soldering iron and just touch these are the wires prepared and tinned. So now the yellow wire will have to go on the outside there. I just want to get a bit more solder on here. And get some solder onto these pads now too. Let me just turn this to make it easier. Get a little bit more solder onto this one on the end here. There we go. Just going to clean the soldering iron here. Need to connect the yellow wire onto this one here. So the yellow wire connected. The red positive wire goes into the one in the middle. The red wire connected, and then the black ground wire to the one on the end. Yeah. And that's it. These are the wires now connected to the receiver. And also, because I'm going to be connecting this UAV buzzer, I need to solder the wires for the buzzer onto the flight controller here as well. And here's the pad for the buzzer wire. Here's a pad for the negative, and here's a pad for the 5 volts positive. So I need to get solder onto these pads. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to put solder onto the buzzer one first here. Heat up a bit here. Get some solder in there. Okay, solder on that one. I've already got solder on here. Let's see if I can get it off onto this pad here. It's got solder on there. And I need to try and get a bit more on here too. There we go there. And then I'm just going to dip the tips of these wires into a bit of flux paste here. Just lightly coat it with some flux pastes. And this will help absorb the solder into the wires too. So the first wire I'm going to solder on is the buzzer wire, which is the green wire on here. It's a green wire connected. Let's do the red wire, the positive wire here. It's the red wire connected. And then just going to bend this black wire a bit. And put it on here. And that's a black wire secured on too. So this is the buzzer also connected. And now I'm going to just tin the wires at the end of the motors to get this ready to connect to the ESC. It's going to take some more flux paste and just get some onto the end of all of these wires here. Okay, now just using small pliers, hold the wire into position and over here, heat it up and get it secured on like that. And now let me go ahead and do the same for the rest of these. So this is all the soldering finished. And before we get on to finishing this build, it's always very important, while you've got all the components exposed and open, that you check very closely and make sure that there's no wires or touching or solder touching pads that it shouldn't be touching, or touching two connections, and that there are no solder beads lying around and adhered onto the circuit boards, because if you blow something, you basically got to go back to scratch again. So good to use a magnifying glass. I have these microscopic spectacles and just check everything nicely. So now we've got the ESC on here. We're ready to mount the flight controller FC board here. And we've got this cable here that gets plugged into the ESC over here. And then the other side gets plugged in over here. It is a bit long. And now you've got to make sure, and this actually helps you ensure, that where you see this arrow here, this is the front end of your build. And for this, we need the soft mounts. And take 4 of the soft mounts and put them on the screws. Get them down. And now we can put the flight controller on. And we take the remaining 4 soft mounts and put them on here too, so that the flight controller has soft mounts on either side, because this helps reduce and eliminate vibration for better performance. And then we take the VTX, and the VTX is going to be connected with this cable that's supplied and goes into here. And this other end will go into here. You do want to have easy access to this button here if you want to change any bands and channels manually. So if I put it this way around, we'll have it near the back. The camera is going to be in the front, so it is actually better. Plus this wire will come around into the front area there. And we put this down now on here. And then we take 4 of these nylon nuts, screw them down on top here. Put these down, then just holding the nut and using the star Phillips screwdriver, just make sure that they're all tight. And also just check and make sure that everything's level and flush. I'm also going to plug in the receiver, which goes in over here. Now, I'm not going to fasten the receiver anywhere because once I get the canopy on, I'd like to position the receiver where I can still have access to the bind button. So we'll just leave it like this for now. And then I also need to find a place for the buzzer, but I'll just connect it on for now. And what I may also do at a later stage is take some silicone. You can get these little sachets of silicone and put it over the slightly exposed wires that are still on the ESC. But I want to make sure everything's okay before I do that. And this just helps if you've got any moisture, you don't have anything possibly shorting any wires. I'll also see if I can get an orange color that will go with this better rather than using a yellow. You can also get electrical insulation liquid, which is black, which is also good to put on to any exposed wiring as well. I'm going to put this aside now and proceed with putting the canopy together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fit these carbon fiber side plates onto the outside of the frame here. And to do this, we're going to use the 6mm screws. Three on each. And these will go into these holes here, there, and at the bottom here. So there are threads on the inside of the frames. So these will just screw in and tighten. And on this one, if we have a look here, we want to put the carbon fiber frame on the opposite side, so it's on the outside of the other side. Before we put these top plates on, we need to put the camera on. It's easier to get the camera in this way. Now, I'm not quite sure which the top way of the camera is, but I'm going to assume this is the top with these wires at the bottom, and put the camera in this way. And these we fasten on with the two 4mm screws. There is a spare one, which is always good. And this also fastens on with a star Phillips screwdriver. I haven't done it too tight. I want to put the other side in here first as well. Okay, so now we've got the camera in here. And then this is for the 5.8 gigahertz antenna. And this is going to come in at the back here. So this fits on to here. And to do this, we need to take this off. Nuts and one of the washers. Leave one washer on the bottom. Put washer back on, spring washer back on here. And fasten this. And this must always be securely fastened. To get the best reception we can this is on securely, and we use 2 of these 12mm screws so that it can reach in over here. Put it around this way. So we've got the pigtail facing towards the inside. Do the same on the other side here. Not going to fasten it too tight yet. Just get the best angle and position for it when it's connected, and then we'll see. And now we can put on the top plate. So we've got this little one here that goes in over here. To secure these, we use 4mm screws, which is this batch here. We can secure this tight. And then we put this plate in over here, and also use 4mm screws to secure it. So these are the plates on the top of the frame, and now ready to put this onto the craft. So here we've got our front section. Now you'll see over here we've got 2 holes here, and we got 2 holes there. So this is going to position on. Now let me get these wires out of the way. And over here in the front we've got this is going to fit in like that. Now my receiver, I think I'm going to, before I put this on, I'm going to mount the receiver on the top here, underneath. And let's just see if I will have space for this rather big buzzer as well. Yes, so I'm going to just put the receiver on here. Okay, so I've got the receiver mounted on here now. Now this buzzer is going to be too big to fit in anywhere under here, but I wanted to test this buzzer, so I'm going to mount this on top after we put the frame on. Now we're ready to put this on, but we need to connect this pigtail antenna, which goes in over here first. That clicks into there. We also need to connect the front camera, which goes in over here. And just feed the 2.4 gigahertz antennas up through the top here first, and then bring this down, and just this pigtail is applying some pressure. And have a look. Yes, all sitting flush. Then we take 4 of these 6mm screws again, put them in here, and screw in, and make sure everything's okay before I tighten completely. And no, not okay, because I want to get this wire on the inside. I'm just going to undo this and put this back in. So this is the top part of the frame all secured in tightly now. And at this stage it's good to go around and make sure that all the screws are tightened, just in case you forgot to tighten any screws in the process. The 5.8 gigahertz antenna goes on here. And now I'm going to use a couple of these cable ties to mount the 2.4 gigahertz antenna up here. So we'll take one here, just feed it in through here. And pull it tightly here. Now I want to do it like this because I want the antenna to splay outwards a bit. And I'll do the same on this side. Right way around. Tighten it so that it holds position here. And then just take two pieces of heat shrink tubing, more or less cut to length here. And we want to feed the antenna up here. And also the cable tie. Push down. And do the same on this side. Standing upright and outward. And then just take a lighter and heat this up so that it shrinks and adheres to the cable tie and the antenna. And that's it. Got the 2.4 gigahertz antennas mounted upright and splayed outwards. And now what I also need to do is shrink this heat shrink on these arms. And I'm going to use a heat gun because I've got a heat gun. But as I said in the beginning, you can use a lighter or even the soldering iron to heat it up and gradually let this shrink and bind onto the arms. So I'm just going to do this off screen. So I've shrunk the heat shrink on the arms. Looks good. And we're nearly done. If you've got a lot of screws left and that, don't worry, there are extras. You haven't missed out on anything. One thing I must mention is that I had to take this washer off to screw on the 5.8 gigahertz antenna here, because with it on, there isn't sufficient space for it to get a decent grip, so we don't get a real good thread down here, but it does fit on securely. And very importantly, never power this up without the 5.8 gigahertz antenna attached, because there's a chance you will burn out the VTX transmitter. So now we can put the battery strap on, and to do this we've got a plate. So we need to feed through here first, and then feed this strap through the bottom under here. So it goes between the bottom of the frame here and beneath the ESC here. And then this will just secure a battery on like this over here. But we also get the silicone pad, which is good to put here because it helps keep the battery from sliding and fits more securely. We also get these foam rubber adhesive pads that you can put on here as an option too. And this is actually better because it will hold it more securely. So I'm going to put this on like this, and to secure a battery, put it on over here like this. Get it sitting as flush and as balanced as you can. And then just pull and tighten. And this is it with the battery on too. And leave the prop fairly straightforward to put the props on, but importantly you get 2 clockwise propellers and you get 2 anti-clockwise propellers. Have a look here, we've got this rough there and it tells you the direction. So this arrow is pointing this way, so this is a clockwise propeller that will go on the front left. This is the other clockwise propeller that will go on to the back right here. And then we have these 2 anti-clockwise propellers. The anti-clockwise propeller will go on the front right and also on the back left. So basically you can see here the blade is in pitches upwards, so when this turns anti-clockwise it creates lift. And likewise with the clockwise propeller. So this is the assembly complete. The next step is to connect to Betaflight and to bind the receiver to a radio controller, which I will include in my review video of this Eachine Tyro109 and put a link in the description if you'd like to have a look at that too. So I know this video was long, but I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you're interested in this or want to build this yourself or build any freestyle or racer FPV drone yourself. So please subscribe, like, comment and share if you like my videos.